This is the story of the most expensive $11 a company ever refused to spend. May 28, 1972, a highway near San Bernardino, California. Lily Gray is driving her 6-month-old Ford Pinto with 13-year-old Richard Grimshaw in the passenger seat. The car stalls in the middle lane. Moments later, it's hit from behind, at less than 40 miles per hour. In most cars, this would have been a survivable, walk-away crash. In the Pinto, the fuel tank ruptures, vapor fills the cabin, and the car erupts in flames. Lily Gray dies. Richard survives, with burns over 90% of his body. Here's the thing. Ford knew. They had run the crash tests. They had priced the fix, $11 per car, by their own Memo's math. And that same Memo had already put an exact price on a human life. This is what that calculation set in motion, and what it actually cost. To understand the Memo, you need to understand the panic. By the late 1960s, small imports, the Volkswagen Beetle, and new arrivals from Japan were eating into the American market. Detroit had nothing to answer with. At Ford, Executive Vice President Lee Iacocca pushed a crash program with a famous rule. The new car must weigh no more than 2,000 pounds and cost no more than $2,000. There was one more constraint: time. A new car normally took around 43 months from concept to showroom. The Pinto program compressed that to roughly 25. Tooling, the multi-million-dollar machinery that stamps the car's body, was ordered while the design was still being finalized. That decision matters because when engineers later found a problem, the expensive answer was already bolted to the factory floor. On September 11, 1970, the Pinto went on sale, starting at around $1,900. It was an immediate hit. Ford would go on to sell over 3 million of them. So where exactly was the flaw? In the Pinto, the fuel tank sat behind the rear axle, just inches from the back bumper, a common layout at the time, but with almost no crush space. In a rear-end collision, the tank was shoved forward into the differential housing, the gear case between the rear wheels, where exposed bolts could puncture it like a can opener. Fuel sprays out, the filler neck tears away, and a single spark does the rest. Ford's own crash tests confirmed it. In test after test at around 20 miles per hour, production Pintos ruptured. The cars that passed had been modified first, and the modifications were not exotic. A plastic baffle between the tank and those bolts, a reinforced filler neck, a liner inside the tank. Internal estimates put the fixes in the range of a few dollars. Figures cited in court ran from about 4 to 8. None of it went on the production car. The Pinto met every federal safety standard of its day. Because in 1970, there was no federal standard for rear impact fuel system integrity. The rule was still being written. And the famous $11. That number is real, and it comes from the document this story is named after. In 1973, the Federal Safety Agency, NHTSA, was drafting tougher fuel system rules. Ford's response included a cost-benefit study by 2 of its engineers, a document known by its authors' names, Grush and Saunby, with a title that says it all: Fatalities Associated with Crash-Induced Fuel Leakage and Fires. Now, a detail most retellings skip. This memo wasn't secretly about the Pinto. It was a lobbying document against a proposed rollover regulation covering all vehicles, and the price of a life it used wasn't invented at Ford. It came from the government's own 1972 estimate: $200,725 per death. Lost productivity, medical bills, legal fees, funeral costs, $900. Even a line item for victims' pain and suffering, $10,000, flat. Here's the math the memo ran in the driest language imaginable. The benefits of the safety change each year: 180 burn deaths prevented, 180 serious burn injuries, 2,100 burned-out vehicles. Total $49.5 million. The cost, $11 a vehicle, across 12.5 million cars and light trucks, $137 million. Conclusion: the safety improvement fails the test. Don't require it. On a spreadsheet, it's just arithmetic. And to be fair, regulators run versions of this calculation to this day. But when this document surfaced in court, next to crash test reports and a car that burned at city speeds, The public didn't see policy analysis. They saw a corporation that had done the math on their lives and decided they weren't worth $11. For years, the fires stayed scattered in local news. Then, in the fall of 1977, the magazine Mother Jones published an investigation titled Pinto Madness, putting the crash tests, the memo, and the burn victims into one story. How many people actually died in Pinto fires is still debated. The government officially confirmed 27. Estimates at the time ran into the hundreds. The federal government opened an investigation, found a safety defect, and in 1978, Ford recalled 1.5 million Pintos. 6 years after Lily Gray's crash. That same year, the Grimshaw lawsuit reached its verdict. Richard Grimshaw was a young man by then, after years of skin grafts and reconstructive surgeries. The jury awarded him over $2.5 million in compensation. Then they sent a message: $125 million in punitive damages, punishment for what Ford's own documents showed. The judge later cut it to $3.5 million. Still one of the largest punitive awards ever upheld against a car maker in America. And then it got worse. In August 1978, 3 teenage girls, 2 sisters and their cousin, died in a burning Pinto in Indiana. A county prosecutor did something no one had done before. He charged a corporation, Ford itself, with reckless homicide. No American company had ever stood criminal trial for its product. Ford hired a top defense team. The judge kept key internal documents out of evidence, and the defense argued the van that hit the girls was going far too fast for any small car to survive. In 1980, Ford was found not guilty, but the precedent was set. A corporation could face criminal court for its engineering decisions. That same year, quietly, the Pinto was discontinued. So let's close the ledger, because this is Reconomics, and the numbers deserve a final audit. What did the $11 decision save? On 12.5 million vehicles, about $137 million on paper. What did it cost? A recall of 1.5 million cars years later at far higher cost per unit than the factory fix. The Grimshaw verdict, followed by dozens of similar lawsuits. A criminal trial whose defense reportedly cost about $1 million to defend a car that had earned its nickname, the barbecue that seats 4. A brand so damaged the product itself had to die. Add it up, and the fix Ford declined to spend was a rounding error on what followed. One last irony, that $200,000 price of a life. The same government agency prices a statistical life today at roughly $13 million. Even adjusting for inflation, that is about 9 times higher. The memo's math wasn't just cold. By the government's own later numbers, it was cheap. The Pinto case rewrote product liability, put corporations within reach of criminal court, and became the opening chapter of every engineering ethics textbook. Not because the math was unusual, but because for once the public got to read it. Next time on Reconomics, a $4 part, a company that had survived 84 years and the largest automotive recall in history. Subscribe, the ledger stays open.